Without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Why, hello, and welcome once again to Carmine's Arena, site of contest and conflict, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment, both yours and mine, to the preservation, the propagation, and the celebration of Western civilization. Now, the last time we pointed out that the matrix of beauty is truth, and the template of truth is just reasoning. That's a mouthful, but it really is basically quite simple. If it ain't beautiful, it's probably wrong. And in this episode, we are going to discuss schools and community and the impact each has on the other in terms of standards and effectiveness. A bad argument is never improved by repetition. Yet, for decades now, I've heard the bad argument that education is ineffective and continues to decline because we're not spending enough money on it. Now, I find this utterly unconvincing. For when I went to school, the last thing on the teachers' minds was money. Believe me, I was very fortunate. I attended public school, and most of my teachers seemed to have a calling. All were certainly accomplished. Some were great. President Garfield, our 20th president, said, "Give me a log hut, a simple log bench, a great teacher, and you can keep your buildings, your apparatus, and your libraries without the great teacher." Henry Adams, who wrote a marvelous book on education, a classic, said that the effect of a great teacher is one on eternity. One doesn't ever know where the influence will stop. In keeping with that, I should like to read you this anecdote that I came upon. During the presidency of Dwight David Eisenhower, James Michener, author of Hawaii, The Source, and other mega bestsellers, was invited to a celebrity dinner at the White House. In a letter, Michener declined to attend. "Dear Mr. President, I received your invitation 3 days after I had agreed to speak a few words at the dinner honoring the wonderful high school teacher who taught me how to write. I know you will not miss me at your dinner, but she might at hers." A week later, Michener received a handwritten reply from the understanding Ike. "In his lifetime," said Eisenhower, "a man lives under 15 or 16 presidents. But a really fine teacher comes into his life but rarely. Go and speak at your teacher's dinner." The influence is eternal. Now, Aristotle, in 5th century Athens, that's BC, in talking about what we talk about so much today, the redistribution of wealth, etc., ad infinitum. Again, schools are thrown in after the billions that we've spent on them. Somehow or other, that doesn't count. There's got to be more. It's the old money fix each time. This is what Aristotle had to say. It is in the nature of desire, not to be satisfied, and most men live only for the gratification of desire. The beginning of reform, reform that we talk so much about, the beginning of reform is not so much the equalizing of property as to the training of the noble sort of nature to desire less and to prevent the lower from getting more. Now, of course, there is the realization that the money fix doesn't always work, and the realization that there are nobler sorts and lower sorts. We're not supposed to say that anymore. That is not politically correct, but we all know it is certainly realistically accurate and more than adequate to describe the people we run into, because in the same family, one sibling to the other, you will see nobility and you will see absolute decadence. Okay? That's fairly obvious, but you're not supposed to stress that too much. It is because morality today has been devoured by the secular progressives in the form of pack-men. You know, the pack-men that gobble up everything. They gobble up any kind of standard of behavior. I'm thinking, when I think of schools and community, what in Bold Fresh, the bestseller of Bill O'Reilly, Mr. O'Reilly points out that in 1960, American babies were born and only 5% of them were illegitimate. Imagine, 5%. I remember when a female became pregnant and she wasn't married, it was a disaster for her and everybody else, and it was almost as if she was going to be sent into banishment. It was a horrible condition to find oneself in. Now, amongst whites, illegitimacy has hit 35% of babies born, and a staggering 70% for African Americans. 70% for African Americans. Now, this fatherless condition impacts schools as well as community, society, the nation. To say otherwise is to preach what pack-men, our secular progressives, are always so willing to point out, that when we make arguments like this, the arguments I've just made, and point out these dreadful statistics, deplorable statistics, we're only taking that tack because it is the white cop-out for white guilt. Well, I can assure you, I feel no guilt whatsoever. There are too many African Americans who have proven the inadequacy, the inaccuracy of that statement. Look about you. Fatherless homes, increased dropout rates, create people who cannot find living wages, who become idle, and as a result of wanting desperately to find a cure, enter a life of crime for bread. The decline of marriage, not only in America but in the West, is the triumph of desire over judgment. And remember, desire is rarely satisfied. In fact, that's the reason why dope addicts have a lot of trouble. They can change from substance to substance, but the thing they can't give up is desire. The biological clock ticks for career women who can't find anybody to commit to them, so they show up at sperm banks and they find characterless males who could care less where their children are, who they are, and how many they are. Now, if you can't find a mate, chances are nature's telling you something, and you shouldn't slough yourself off on children just to be called mommy. As far as those depositors are concerned at the sperm bank, I haven't the time to deplore them. Perhaps another. But we have, again, a moneymaker by the name of Maury Povich, who appears daily on television and frequently has for his entire broadcast a woman of easy virtue suddenly wanting to determine, although Murray seems to be more interested than she does half the time, as to who the father is, and there they are waiting online to be told which among them DNA has accused. It's positively mind-boggling that man should feel comfortable in validating that kind of behavior. But that's where we are today. The calamity and the curse of money. Yes, it can be a blessing, but in the hands of low sorts, it's always going to be a curse. Schools have become designed for babysitting, serving free lunches and breakfasts for pupils who generate pensions for false pedants. I have met some of these false pedants, as well as I've met great ones, but they're few and far between, the latter. The others care little, once they achieve tenure, for any more learning. In other words, they have no vocation. They are not endlessly teachable people. And who wants them in a classroom? Not I. Gone is discipline in schools. Isn't that so? And gone is a sense of occasion. I look at children graduating, and there they are in cap and gowns, and every once in a while the gown splits or slits, or the wind blows it apart. And there they are in shorts and in dungarees, ready to play in the park as they are when they go occasionally to services for worship, or go to a restaurant, or go to a formal occasion. They always look unkempt, mangy, and the excuse is, well, they're teenagers. I can guarantee you, when I was a teenager, I was as much a fusspot as I am today. Never was I a slob. It's unacceptable. It was unacceptable. I guess I could have been one if it were permitted. It was not permitted. We have now co-ed classes. They didn't obtain years ago. Now it's innovative. There's a study. They want to separate boys and girls because they don't mature at the same rate. Can you imagine? They just discovered this. And that they don't learn at the same rate. And as a result, it impacts the other, and it has a negative effect. And it would be better to separate them. Well, that's nice. They call it innovation. Everything that happens in education that's old is called innovative. It's new and improved. Now, the thing is that with co-ed classes, we got an abundance of touchy-feely, huggy-wuggy dynamics going on, where each day we have a pound of lust for each ounce of learning. But of course, it's important that we socialize as well as bully. Now, the thing is, all of this is hidden behind grade inflation. even at the Ivy League level. Grade inflation. Larry Summers had to give up his post as president of Harvard because that's one of the things he deplored. Grade inflation. It's done constantly, and when there's a school-wide test, those results are very often gamed and tweaked to give the proper percentile of effectiveness. I'm not fooled by it. And those in on the know aren't. 45 years ago, Senator Moynihan, a brilliant senator as well as professor, wrote a study proving the illegitimacy mounting at geometric proportions created a tangle of societal pathology. Yet, we are not supposed to embarrass children. Oh, no, they'll lose their self-esteem, whether earned or unearned. You don't want to damage their ego. Do not embarrass a child, or as a teacher, you will be called down to the principal's carpet. And yet, science has proven the following. Animals, four-legged ones, love their young, show sense of humor, communicate with one another, and get this, exhibit embarrassment. They either hide their eyes or shrink away when they've done something stupid. But of course, we're too advanced, excuse me, to employ this tool of nature, given to us freely, to feel embarrassment so that we don't repeat the stupidity that caused it in the first place. But to emphasize how true what I say is, many high school yearbooks today, particularly I'm thinking of some in the Bronx, have the senior graduating yearbook with the females first shown in pictures, and then you go to the back and you can see the pictures of their babies. Now they're no longer banished, they're exalted. Does anybody talk about what's happening to the children? No, you don't want to bring that up. That's a cop-out to go that route. That's not to understand, yes, hormones. And why should they feel ashamed when our nanny state subsidizes this out-of-wedlock perfidy? Now, teachers have joined the pupils along with the administration because without parental warning today, instead of contributing to a child's growth and education and character building, instead of contributing, they now distribute condoms. This is the answer to address the Pac-Man gobbling up of moral imperatives. Schools and community and their impact on one another is awesome. Awesome. You know, Louisa May Alcott had a wonderful father, you know, the novelist of Little Women. Amos Bronson Alcott said this about teachers' influence. You know, the teachers just love when children imitate them. It's sickening. The true teacher defends his pupil against his own personal influence. You hear that? That was written in the 19th century. He inspires, teachers do, or a teacher does, self-trust. He guides their eyes from himself to the spirit that quickens him. He will have no disciples. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a great thinker, and wrote a wonderful book, Émile, on education. Émile said, "In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I was considered a passable teacher because everybody else in town was a bad one." You see, this is a problem that's been going on for quite a while. Some people secrete themselves into education because they figure that kids are not going to be able to judge them. But kids do judge them all too well. But they form the cabal now. And everything and anything goes. But education never transpires. I have a pupil who was teaching several years back in Atlanta. He received a PhD, and as is necessary, he brought the accreditation in to his principal, who at once informed him, "Don't think I'm going to call you doctor or anybody else. This is a principal of a high school." Now, this same person, the same PhD, teaches elsewhere and was declared Teacher of the Year. Can you imagine that principal being of any use to children? I was talking not too long ago to an elderly person who told me that he wanted to be a substitute teacher when he was younger. And he worked at it, and he was told that he had to take speech classes. He said, "Why?" "Because you have a Bronx accent, and regional speech is not permitted in New York schools. Now you press 1 for English, and even if you press 2, I've studied Spanish for 5 years, I'm hearing the most ungrammatical nonsense possible." When I went to school, the first thing I heard was, over the loudspeaker, a reading from the Old Testament. It let you know immediately there was something above the school, the principal, and everybody else. And that though we were there to learn, we were also there to be righteous, good. There was an understanding of good. That's not present any longer. In Bill O'Reilly's Bowl Fresh, again, he points out that he had a fearsome nun who had 60 in the class, including him. 60! Talk about class size. A woman who never worried about money. By the age of 8, they were all reading and writing. We have college graduates who can't write a declarative sentence. What this country needs, perhaps, with that nun in mind, is a regiment of undercover nuns to go around making sure that kids learn. Teachers need a vocation, a calling. It is a sacred compulsion to want to teach. Today, indulgent parents who buy their kids all sorts of inventions and electronics, where there's never a here or a here now, there's only a there then, thumbing their way through life on buttons. These parents are guilt-ridden. They don't spend even quantity time with their children, let alone quality time, or quality time and quantity time. You get your cues, I get my cues mixed up with that nonsense. They don't spend much time, period. And so they make up with it. Again, they throw money at it. But when the kid gets into trouble in school, guess what? They show up with a lawyer, more money. I know one high school that has 5 lawyers retained for just this kind of litigious battle with parents. protecting their monstrous children. Okay? What good is that? What good is it? What good is it? The matrix of truth is beauty. Where's the beauty in that? And the template of truth is just reason. Children are not fragile. When they're born, every one of their mother's contractions places on them an enormous amount of pressure. We have children going to the Bolshoi Ballet from America, leaving their homes thousands of miles away to be yelled at, screamed at, ordered around, pummeled, pinched, and as if turned into clay they have to get their legs to finally produce the poetry of the foot. And the kids love it. In this country, a teacher dare not do that, for each of them at a ballet school has to cover themselves with a $2 million liability policy in case they forget themselves at any point in time and lay hands on their pupils. We have kids joining gangs. They can't follow parental rules, but they can follow codes that are Byzantine and inflict upon themselves injuries that, were they to be meted out by a court system, would be constitutionally considered cruel and inhuman punishment. Mark Twain said, and how important it is that we remember this, I never allowed my schooling to get in the way of education. I wish teachers would remember that. Yes, what we need is not money, but someone who can inspire each of us to become the best version of ourselves. That, my friends, is bliss, and that's what I wish you and your children. Till next time, keep the faith.
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.